everyone. I'm so happy to see you on Agile Day conference, and I'm glad to introduce Anwar. He's solution architect with more than 9 years of experience in mobile, web, enterprise development, SCRUM, extreme programming approaches, and he very likes public speaking and knowledge sharing. So, also, I just want to tell you that you have an opportunity to ask some question to Anwar. We have an Q&A section, and there you can publish your question. We will answer on this question in the end of this topic. Also, I will share the link to our community Z portal, where you have an opportunity to ask question later. So when the Anwar will finish his talk, you can go there and write some comments or vote for his talk or ask more extra question, which was not have enough time on this session. So Anwar, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. I will share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, let's get started. Hello, everybody. I'm very grateful to be here at the Agile Day conference, and I would like to thank you for joining my presentation. I hope that you will enjoy everything and you will get quite a lot of useful information in insights. And, you know, I don't have any ideas what's my audience today, but I guess that we have many technical guys, developers, architects, team leads, as well as other folks, project managers, product owners, scrum masters. And what I think is that all of you joined this presentation to get an answer to one question: how much upfront design Agile teams must do. Before I present myself, I'd like to tell a couple of words about my presentation. Everything what I will explain is based on my personal experience and past projects and some articles, books, and videos which I read, watched, and listened to. Most probably you have another opinion, another point of view, and it's okay. It's normal. At the end of my presentation, we'll have question answer session, and you can raise your hand and we can discuss something which is maybe can have another point of view. About me, my name is Anwar Nurmakanov. I'm a solution architect. I have been working at EPAM more than 10 years. Frankly, it was 10 years, 20th of September, so a couple of days more than 10 years. And I live in Kazakhstan. I'm a guy who loves engineering excellence practices, extreme programming practices. I believe in agile thinking. And I'm a guy who cannot live without programming, and my favorite platform is Java. Okay, let's move on. I don't know what's going on, but give me a second. Something happened with my presentation. Okay, now it's better. The main question of my presentation: how much upfront design Agile teams must do. And frankly, I know quite a lot of developers and development teams where this problem or this question appears so often, so many times, and still they don't have something concrete to say about it. And before I move on, I'd like to ask you one question. How much upfront design you do in your teams? There is no need to answer aloud. You can type your answer somewhere in the chat. It's okay. And at the end of my presentation, we'll check them in more details. But I guess that when you decided to join my presentation, you had one thought. This guy who presents this topic must know everything about this thing, because he's experienced, he has more than 10 years, and most probably he knew everything since the beginning of his career. But I would like to be honest with you. During my career, and it's more than 10 years, I changed my mind twice. And I'm gonna tell you why. This is my story. This is my journey, this is my experience, and I'm okay if you will use some of the strategies or approaches in your projects. Feel free to share this presentation, this video with your friends, because the main idea and goal of this conference to share something useful and helpful for other people. Anyway, when I started working as developer, and it was more than 10 years ago, there was nothing but waterfall. Everybody was doing waterfall, and my first projects also had waterfall approach. I cannot say that we had quite a lot of problems or issues with waterfall. It worked quite well, and yeah, it was just fine, I would say. But me and my teammates, we wanted to find some kind of improvements or other ideas which can make our team better. In many terms, it's programming, it's processes, and we started looking for something else. 3 years passed, and I found one wonderful book which is named Agile Samurai, and I was inspired by all of the ideas listed in this book. I'm not gonna deep into details because you can find something more in internet. There are at least one book, a couple of videos, and a couple of articles. Feel free to take your time and Google, and you will find quite a lot of useful information about this concept. But I was inspired by all of the things connected to feedback loop, and there are many things like unit testing, pair programming, continuous integration, continuous delivery, and I could not imagine my life without test-driven development. I was writing everything through test-driven development. I was delivering everything with continuous integration, continuous delivery in my mind, and some other things from not only from extreme programming, from SCRUM framework. And I could not imagine delivering something without passing code review process. It was something necessary and very important for me and my teammates. After that, I started feeling that I can do everything what I want. Whatever I decide to deliver is very possible for me because I have enough tools, practices, and techniques, and everything what I listed before can be very helpful. And I had this feeling that I have some kind of get power. I even thought that there is no need to use any sort of upfront design because it's heavy. It doesn't let you move fast. It doesn't let you to be flexible and agile because you have to spend quite a lot of time to prepare this upfront design and explain everything to all of the stakeholders and teammates. And the idea of my approach was to react on architectural and design changes only when it's needed. And according to Scrum framework, it's only one option. It's our sprint, it's our iteration. And I thought, okay, whenever we have a problem or a challenge, technical challenge, me and my teammates, we can sit all together and we'll figure out how to fix this problem. There is no need to prepare anything in advance because we're experienced team, we have all of the tools, and we can, like solve this problem. It's not a big deal. And I will tell you one secret. I was not alone. I knew quite a lot of people who had the same way of thinking, and still we can find many development teams who consider this approach as the best one or maybe the most workable. The question I had, because I faced some problems, and I will explain later on what kind of problems I faced, but I wanted to know, are there any other options? What else we can use to be more ready or fix or solve any kind of technical problems? Before I start answering on this question, I'm gonna give you a couple of definitions. And the first one is upfront design. Most probably you will find many wonderful and interesting definitions, but I prefer this one. For me, upfront design is something like thinking about the architecture early. And if we want to understand upfront design, we should understand what is architecture. There are many great and amazing definitions, but I've prepared only a couple of them. Here's the first one from the Martin Fowler, who says that architecture is the shared understanding that expert developers have of the system design. And one more definition from Martin Fowler. He's saying that architecture is decisions you wish you could do early in the project. Frankly, that's something what I experienced many times. For example, right now, when I open my set of services, I wish that I could make some other things before in advance. So it's very common thing for many of us. There is another definition from Software Engineering Institute, and it's saying that software architecture is this conceptual glue that holds every phase of the project together for its many stakeholders. My favorite definition, again, it's from Martin Fowler, and he says that architecture is the stuff that's hard to change. Again, I experienced this thing so many times, and I will give you one more example later on, because it's not only about software, it's about apartment renovation and many other things, and most probably you also experienced such things before or right now even. Okay, but why does architecture matter? What kind of good things it can bring? Why we should worry about architecture in a front design? And the first thing I want to mention is that when you have architecture, you will have well-designed solution, which is simple to support in future. Because everything is explained, everybody knows where our components, everybody knows what kind of rules and techniques we must follow. So it's well prepared for future. Another point is about blueprint. If we have architecture, we have some kind of guidance for us, which explains what kind of elements from cloud and kind of components we should use for this particular problem. And we start taking care of some qualities of our system, for example, performance, security, reusability, and many other things. Our solution will be flexible for changes, and we'll have some kind of way to assign work. If we have more than one team, we will be able to split the work across them, and they will know what kind of things they will be implementing. But the main question which I have right now, does Agile World say anything about architecture? Or does it say anything about architects? Just think about it. There is no need to answer. You can write your answer in the chat, and others will be able to read it, and maybe they will share their opinion as well. You know, when Agile was born, we had not many things to relate to. And one of the most important artifacts from Agile world is Agile Manifesto. And most probably, if we want to find something about architecture and architects, we should look at this Agile Manifesto. And here's a list of some, like statements from this manifesto. And I want to show you only two of them. The first one, working software is much more important than comprehensive documentation. And the second one is saying that responding to change is much more important than following a plan. Some people can say, okay, it means that there is no need to worry about architecture. We can take our development without any architects and implement everything without their help or their assistance. I will tell you one secret again, like sharing some secrets. Even if you don't have solution architecture even if you have solution architecture documents, still your system has the architecture. It's not about description, it's about some kind of property of your system. And what's more important is how and when you think about it and take care of it. Even if you don't have architecture described somewhere in Confluence, it's one of the properties of your system. And that's the fact. One more question. What does Agile World say about upfront design and documentation? There is one statement from Agile World, and it says that the best architectures emerge from self-organized teams. It means that we can have a group of experienced people who know about domain, about technical part of the solution, and they must be able to deliver everything without any kind of architects, because they should have enough tools and enough things to deliver everything what was planned. Frankly, I don't believe in self-organized teams. From my perspective, it's very good part of Agile, but it's very tough to achieve this. Still, many teams require some kind of management and supervision from other roles. And even if you name your team as self-organized, most probably it's just one of the exceptions. It's my personal point of view. Maybe you have pretty good examples and feel free to share them in the chat. Let's say that we have self-organized teams and what they can do. They can identify problems without any supervision. They can generate ideas to fix these problems. They can take them in progress and fix. And here we have technical and architectural questions as well. Let's assume that we have one self-organized team and people from this team want to design something in front. What will Agile world say about this approach? Frankly, some of you may think that Agile world is against upfront design. And there are a couple of reasons, because requirements can change. For example, in the beginning, we might have one set of features which are important for our end users. Sometime after, we might get something else. And sometime after, it can be completely different comparing to what we planned in the first phase of our project. There is another point. Some Agile people believe that it's waste of time. Let's say that we did something upfront, we designed our system, but sometime after we got another constraint, or we just have scope changes. It's quite risky, and Agile people prefer not to take such risk. For them, it's again waste of time, and it's better to take technical and architectural questions whenever they appear in their radars or backlogs. One more reason is testing. I guess that all of you agree with me that upfront design is something like which cannot be touched. It's not tangible at all. For example, we might have a development team and we did some kind of upfront design in advance. And the first question which will they have, our developers and QA guys, how can we test it? Because it's just set of proof of concepts, set of diagrams, how we can be sure that everything what is described here will be achieved. One more reason, software development, it's not something like persistent or constant set of definitions. We always learn something new from many different places. For example, during delivery, we can realize that our end users want something else, and they provided feedback, and their opinion is very different comparing to what we initially planned. We can get some insights from the market. For example, new innovation is available, and it's better to use this innovation in our system too. We might get something from our competitors, from other companies. For example, it happened when Netflix introduced streaming instead of selling any kind of DVD formats. And many, many other things. Can we change our upfront design if we got something during our process of development? I don't believe that many of you or like those development teams will say, okay, let's change upfront design, because in most of the cases, people consider upfront design something like the main artifact. We should follow all of the plan, all of the rules described there, and nothing else can be done. From my perspective, it's a myth, and I will tell you why, but a bit later. I also want to mention a couple of challenges which I faced with this Agile mindset. And the very first one is about user story-based architecture. Let's assume that we have a product and we got a request from our business to implement first user story. And the idea is to create a stair. We did everything according to acceptance criteria. We delivered everything. We showed everything to our end users, and everybody was happy. We started working on another user story, and the idea was to introduce a door somewhere in our house. We did everything well again, without any problems. Everybody was super happy. But when we started checking everything all together, we realized that we have integration problems. The first user story doesn't work with the second one, and it's a problem. And it's one of the common problems of agile teams because they don't take into account some kind of whole solution from the whole perspective. Another problem is coordination between several Scrum teams. I don't think that it's possible to find a product where we have only one development team. It happens. I cannot say that it's not something like not real, but still, usually it's more than one development team. We might have even 3, 5, 10, 100 development teams, and every of those teams can be self-organized according to our Agile manifesto. And Team A can make architectural and technical decisions. Team B can make, again, architectural decisions, and Team C can make architectural decisions as well. But can we be sure that they will not lose track of the whole solution from the whole perspective, from the high-level point of view? They can forget that our performance must be working according to some scenarios collected in the beginning or maybe expected by our stakeholders. They can forget about security because they worry only about their components. They can forget about some other qualities of our system. So it's one of the common problems of agile teams, which is quite, like famous, at least for me, and most probably you experience the same problem too. After that, I realized that something is wrong, and I was searching for answers. What else I can use? What kind of other approaches can be applicable? Because Agile mindset doesn't work in all of the cases. And the next chapter of my life was about solution architecture. I'm a very avid person. I like learning something new. And since the beginning of my career, I was a fellow who preferred technical part, who preferred architecture and technical ideas more than processes and software organizational part. And I started learning architectural skills. For example, software architecture is the first step. After that, I became aware about solution architecture, which is something additional to software architecture. It's very different. It's another topic, and I don't have enough time to explain everything about this point, but I hope that I'll have the opportunity next time. I also became interested about business architecture and things like business drivers, business goals, business objectives became something like very important for me because it's some kind of start or beginning for every solution architecture research and work. I also started using the concept of architecture significant requirements, which can impact any kind of solution a lot. And the idea of architectural significant requirements is to get all requirements, find only those that can impact our solution more than anything else. And after that, we'll have architectural significant requirements. Usually here we mention things like qualities of our system, quality attributes. And it can be performance, security, scalability, many factors. And if we don't take them into account, most probably our application will fail sometime after. There is another point which became very important for me and for my way of thinking. It's evolvability of systems, evolutionary architecture. We cannot say that everything what we have right now will remain in the same shape, in the same set of qualities till the end of the life of our product. And I want to give you one more example. This is from my personal life. When I did my apartment renovation, it was more than 2 years ago. Guys who did plumbing system, they made a couple of mistakes. And sometime after I wanted to introduce something additional on top of what I had, and it was super expensive because everything was done in the wrong way. The same thing can happen with your architecture. If you didn't take into account something in the beginning, most probably you will face a big issue or problem in the middle of your delivery. And I started worrying about the way I used before. Does it work? Does Agile Mindset can does Agile Mindset able to cover everything? Because we can lose money, we can introduce more risk, and we won't be able to scale our system because many factors depend on all of these things which I mentioned before. Maybe it's better to design upfront as much as we can. This was my new, like approach or strategy. We can take all of the requirements. We can include non-functional requirements, constrain functional requirements, and design something for that. But again, can we be sure that will not change our initial design? We might do huge amount of work. We might prepare huge amount of documents, diagrams, and proof of concepts. But are there any guarantees that it will remain? It will be the same in 2 years, in 1 year, even in a couple of months? I can say that it happens only in fairy tales. Again, this is from my experience. I can give you a couple of examples. I've already mentioned one of them. It's about movies. And in the United States of America, there was one company which was selling DVDs or allowing to rent movies as DVDs. And sometime after, another company entered the market and they started streaming movies and maybe some other video items. And this company is the first company, they lost their piece of cake and they just, like not available anymore, and you will not find this company on the market. It's one good example of market change or functional requirements change, and we must be always ready for such kind of things. One more example, it's more technical and it's about constraints. Let's say that initially we had one cloud provider, and by some reasons, can be because of money, because of some contracts, we got a request or recommendation to move from one cloud provider to another. It can be from AWS to Azure, from Azure to AWS, from Google Cloud, from Ali Cloud, many cloud providers. I'm not saying that it's always from AWS or Azure. One more example, we might have some new constraints, new time to market. For example, we want to be better than our competitors. We want to introduce some new great features, and new time to market is going to be in 1 month. Another example, we might have less money. It's also very possible. Budget cut or maybe some other needs for IT department or some new other products, it can happen. Or we can have completely new scope. For example, we thought that this product will be killer feature, but now we realize that it will never be able to deliver something valuable for end users, and it's much better to work on something else. Of course, we can freeze our requirements and pretend that everything is okay because we have this upfront design, we have our architecture, and nobody can touch it. Nobody can say that we must do things in different way. But again, it happens only in fairy tales, because if we don't adjust our process to market changes, to all of the constraints, we will just not survive. We'll not be able to continue and we'll lose our business. Oh, something happened with my presentation. Give me a second. Okay, now it's better. I was, something like in doubts again. I knew that I cannot live with that, with Agile mindset, because it doesn't work. It works, but not everywhere. And architecture mindset doesn't work too. And the main question I had, what can I do? I was at crossroad of Agile mindset and architecture. It was maybe the biggest question for me. All of them, of course, have some good parts. For example, architecture mindset brings things like taking into account house solution in the beginning. We not consider only one specific part of our software. It's also designing for architecture significant requirements. We take into account many important things like performance, security, and other qualities. We prevent risk upfront because we want to be future-proof. We want to reduce amount of risk as much as we can. And regarding Agile mindset, we accept requirements changes, which is also good because if you're not agile, if you're not flexible, you will not survive. Self-organized teams, it's a very good point because people know that they will not get too much help and they must solve problems only with their tools and with their experience and knowledge. And flexible decision strategy, that's what I like in Agile mindset. Anyway, why cannot we use both of them? Why cannot we use power of both? And the next part of my career, the next part of my journey was about using power of both. I can explain why. For example, this famous book, Software Architecture in Practice, says that best teams may be self-organizing, but the best architecture still require much more than this technical skill, deep experience, and deep knowledge. Which means that it's normal to have self-organized teams who can tackle any kind of things in front of them, but they need some sort of help from other people. And there is no need to think that self-organized teams is only one way to work with technical challenges and any kind of other challenges. One more point, and I know that many people used to this definition that agile is not something like this, it's bad. We should deliver something like this when our end users can touch something, when they can play with it. But I would add a bit more. From my perspective, we might have bad agile if we don't have plan, if we don't have architecture. And at the same time, we might have very bad agile if we follow some traditional approaches from waterfall, let's say, which means that if we have big upfront design, the most important word here is big. If we have big upfront design and big upfront architecture, we'll not be able to, like make changes in our processes, in our solutions. So it's much better to have a rough adaptive plan and rough adaptive architecture. It's prepared, but we know that there are some variables and it can be one value in 1 month, it can be another value in 2 months. So the idea of good agile is to prepare, but not introduce too much details. And there is another thing, for example, Scaled Agile Framework started saying something about the architecture. And I know that many organizations, many product companies want to scale, and most probably you follow Scaled Agile Framework or another approach. But what they're saying that even if we have self-organized teams, even if we have emergent design, it's not enough. Emergent design is not something complete due to business challenges and architectural initiatives. We know that our teams can correct what we wanted in the beginning, they can experience something new, they can innovate, they can introduce good parts, new ideas, let's say, but still we need something higher. And this part is named intentional architecture. We must think about intentional architecture since the beginning of our development. And only altogether, these two parts can bring something useful and valuable for our delivery, for our end users. One more point, these two parts must be in balance because it's always different. We might have a large team, we might have a small team, we might have scaled teams where we have more than one team. And if we have super large team, it's much better to pay much more attention to intentional architecture, but of course we should not forget about emergent architecture too. If we have small teams, yeah, and pretty small product, in this case, intentional architecture should be, but at minimum level. More important is emergent architecture. And one more concept from Scaled Agile Framework, which is named Architectural Runway. It's some kind of preparation or some sort of start point for development when we take something new. It can be a new service, can be a new product, or some sort of innovation. For example, we want to introduce IoT, or we want to introduce machine learning. In this case, we should have these roles. The first one is system architect, who represents some kind of product owner, technical product owner. We'll have Scrum Master, we'll have new technology initiative development team, and they must prepare some sort of proof of concepts or working parts which can be used in future by development teams. You can find on the slide on the left side that we deliver something which can be used later on, and delivery teams take it. And they start delivering everything according to Agile principles and Agile ideas. Altogether, here on the slide, you can find three levels. The first one is enterprise architecture, where we start thinking about intentional architecture. What's the idea of our final solution? We also have program level, where we have architectural runaway. We also involve solution architects or system architects. It's always different from one definition to another. And we have team level with immersion design. And we, like merge everything together. Intentional architecture, immersion design. We gather feedback from architects, from development teams. Only in this way we can, say that we are doing something which will fit our initial intent and final destination. Okay, maybe I explained something, but I do believe that you still have this question: how much upfront design Agile teams must do? Oh, again, problem. And my answer is very simple: just enough architecture or good enough architecture. And what is just enough architecture, good enough architecture? There is a well-known definition of this idea, which is named walking skeleton or walking architecture. And it's saying that there is no need to create a proof of concept which does everything. We just need to worry about our first phase, first upcoming period. And we will deliver some kind of proof of concept which will have only basic functionality, which will cover the most important and significant requirements for our architecture and for our business. And again, a technical problem. And yeah, after that, we can start delivering our software. For example, we designed everything. We did our walking skeleton, and we take our sprints one by one. The first sprint, the second sprint, one more sprint. We might have 10 sprints or 20 sprints. In every of those sprints, we can collect feedback from our business, from our developers, from our DevOps guys. And finally, we can realize after one of our sprints that new skeleton, new additional changes in our architecture required for that. And we can take the part two. We can implement the second version of our walking skeleton. So what I'm going to say, software design is not one-time activity. It's a constant process where getting feedback is critical. You cannot, say that it should work as we planned in the beginning. We always try to observe, we always try to get something new from our stakeholders, including end users. But still, you would like to know what's the size of this first skeleton? How much upfront design we should do there for step one? And I want to say that it depends. It depends on many factors. The first one, time to market and cost. If we know that we don't have too much time, it's not a good idea to prepare something big and try to deliver everything in the first proof of concept. There is another factor, maturity of our development teams. For example, if we have very experienced team, yeah, in this case, we can prepare something more tangible. If the team is not experienced, in this case, we should take only something super important. And potential market changes, if we know in advance that a new innovation might happen or our competitors are working on something else, in this case, we also should take into account and not create something huge and big. Another factor, amount of unknown about business. If we still learn, if we still get something, in this case, it's not a good idea to create big walking skeleton. And one more thing, lean experiments results. I'm not going too deep into details. It's a very good feature, and nowadays architects use this approach as well to experiment, to understand what works and what doesn't. And from my perspective, from these experiments, we can get huge amount of useful and valuable information for our system. Anyway, even if upfront design is required, we should remember that it will evolve, it will change. We cannot say for sure that in 1 year, in 2 years, we will have the same architecture. One of the good examples is Twitter. Initially, they had one architecture, and sometime after, when they had much more users, millions or maybe hundreds of millions users, they got this point that it's required and very needed to have something else in the architecture. The same most probably will happen with your product. But it is another story. I would like to give more details, but let's agree on that if this presentation goes well, if you provide good feedback and the rank will be high, in this case, I will think about this topic and I will try to present it on one of the upcoming conferences, which is organized by Z Group. So that's pretty much it. I have about 10 minutes and I wanted to summarize everything. What I want to say, many developers, many development teams think that software development is similar to building houses. It's one of the common examples. Yeah, we have to build something. We have this part, we should integrate them. But my point of view is a bit different. I don't think so, because building houses is something more following your plan. And frankly, there are no variables that can change. You have your land, you have builders, you have some kind of architecture well proved by many years, and that's it. In software development, we have so many variables, so many factors which can influence or impact our final solution. I know quite a lot of projects which wanted to have something one, but they changed their mind and delivered completely different thing at the end. It can happen. For me, software development is more like writing a novel. I found this idea on one of the conferences, and I feel that's what I like too, because it explains everything very well. Let's try to analyze what kind of steps we have when we write a novel. First thing is plotting or outline. And for me, it's very similar to first design or first architecture. We should know what kind of parts we have, what will be after what, and does it ring a bell for you? Because in architecture and design, we have pretty similar concept. Another step is writing. And for me, it's some kind of sprints where we can get feedback for the architecture. One more step is revision. Again, we can get feedback. During this revision, we can ask somebody. And one more thing is review, and it's very close to acceptance. And final point is release. I'm not saying that it's completely the same. We still can find many differences, but it's very close because we don't have concrete plan. We know what we should do, and it's more like art than building houses, at least from my perspective. Okay, I would like to thank you for listening to me. I had a couple of technical problems, unfortunately. Something happened with my slides. They were jumping from one to another by some reasons, but that's the final slide of my presentation. And I want to, announce a couple of things. I would like to share a couple of useful channels. The first one is Agile Kazakhstan. I'm one of those guys who lead Agile Kazakhstan initiative in my country. I have some friends of mine who help me, who do the same. But if you have something to say, if you want to share something, feel free to join our community. We'll be more than happy to see you in future events or whatever. I also have one technical channel, which is named the Steep Architect. And here I write more about technical stuff. It's a very new one. I don't have many posts, but I hope that in future I will be producing more and more articles, more and more interesting things. Unfortunately, both of them are in Russian, and if you're English speaking person, in this case, if you have any questions, it's better to find me in LinkedIn and ask your questions there. And one more thing, initially I didn't want to add it here, but since I mentioned writing novels, I like writing, I like fiction writing, and if you want to follow some stupid or maybe interesting stories, you can join this channel as well. Thank you. Time for questions and answers. I'm very sorry for some technical problems which happened during my presentation.
Thank you a lot, Anwar. And we already have some question in our Q&A section. And the first one is, could you give advice how to measure efficiency of architecture? What KPI definition could be formulated for such position in a company?
You know, I love new ideas and new stuff. And I want to say that one of the greatest ideas in architecture world nowadays is evolutionary architecture. Since we know that we will have some changes in future and we have some kind of qualities which we want to have at the end, it's better to use some sort of fitness functions which will make sure that nothing is broken. Regarding KPIs, for me, the best KPI is working software. If your teams are able to deliver something useful and valuable, and it brings happiness to our end users, if we don't have a lot of technical debt, in this case, we don't have a lot of problems with our architecture. Technical debt can appear because of some other reasons, because of delivery, but in most of the cases, architecture can be a reason. If you don't have technical debt, if your teams can deliver everything efficiently, they have pretty high velocity, I would say that KPIs are not needed. You can find something from rational unified process, you can find something maybe in waterfall and some other approaches, but my personal point of view is that it's not a good idea. It's better to just follow and be a servant leader who can help teams to deliver something.
Okay, thank you. So some comments we already have. So it's like just comment that great statement of the problem about architecture via user stories. Always need to keep the larger picture in mind. So it's just some comment.
Yeah, thank you.
And the last question for now. What is your opinion about experienced development team members representing on the architect community with emergent design ideas?
I think that we should involve experience and maybe even all of the developers into architecture processes, because at least from my point of view, architecture is not something like closed club where we have only architects, where we can invite only project managers or delivery managers. We should always be in the same loop with development team. We should know what works, what doesn't work, and if we don't share our opinions, if we don't share our feedback to each other, it will not be working. So for me, the best architects are those architects who write source code, not every time, from time to time, for example, and who listen to development teams and get their like maybe questions or ideas and try to consider everything, because developers, they are stakeholders as well. When people say stakeholders, they usually see business representatives, they see enterprise architects, but developers is just another group of stakeholders who can bring huge amount of insights and amazing ideas. So my answer is it's very important to involve not only experienced developers, but most probably all of the developers.
Okay, thank you a lot for your answering. And we haven't any more question. I just want to tell that if you have some comments or you want to vote on this talk, you just have to go to Community Z and find Anwar's talk. Also, I send the link on his talk. And I just want to tell you a big thank you. It's really great presentation, and we can finish for today.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.